Hi, welcome to Stone Tower Tasting. My name is Sam Miller. I'm one of the sommeliers here on the property, and I'm going to go ahead and take you all through our all red tasting kit. So this has been a really fun experience for us. Normally we have some whites, some rosés kind of blended in, but this is going to be a couple of our reds. So it should be a lot of fun. We're going to go ahead and dive in, and we're going to go ahead and get started. Now, if you haven't taken your wines out of the fridge, go ahead and pause this. You want to have these out of the fridge for about an hour to 2 hours. We also want to have some glasses in front of us. So with 4 wines, I like to have 4 glasses. If you don't have 4 glasses, it's okay. You can go ahead and dump. But I like to have some glasses set aside so I can revisit the wines. It's okay if it's not always a wine glass. If you don't have one, any glass will really do. So we're going to go ahead and get started with our 2016 Wild Boar Merlot. Now we're going to start off with doing tasting size pours. I have faith that everyone watching this video can go ahead and drink all of these, but we're going to start with small amounts. So we're going to start with 1 ounce to 1.5 ounces. It's our standard size pour, and the reason for that is this part of your glass is called the bulb. As I start to swirl it around, this part of the glass is going to fill up. It's going to get the aroma, the molecules are going to kind of loosen up, and when I put my nose in, I'm smelling that. So if I fill up a glass all the way, I only have about that much room, which doesn't really help me out when it comes to detecting things on the nose. So we're going to put about 1 ounce in there. Going to give it a little swirl, pinkies out of course. Now this wine is 77% Merlot, 15% Cab Sauv, and 7% Cab Franc. It's aged for 12 months in French oak. It is fermented in stainless steel. Now, Merlot is the most planted grape in Bordeaux, or in France, really. We have the luxury of it growing very well here in Virginia. A little bit of a different climate, but with that beautiful thick skin, it can really hold up to the storms and the early frost like we have here, like they have in France. So we're gonna swirl it. The first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna stick our nose in the glass. Things we typically smell with Merlot. Merlot is a little bit more of a jammy wine. It can smell a little fruitier on the front as opposed to tart. So this to me has that lovely, like a fruit compote mixture to it, like a really jammy raspberry pie. I'm also gonna smell a little bit of the oak in there, but not too much. I'm really getting a lot of fruit on the front end. So get maybe a little bit of currant in there. Dark chocolate is a big note when it comes to Merlot, and that's typically on the palate. Now with our Merlot, I get a little bit of kind of like a milk chocolate, almost like a sweeter chocolate on it. On the palate, I tend to get that dark chocolate. So we're gonna go ahead and taste this. So good. So tannins in Merlot. Tannins are those lovely things in wine that really dry out your mouth, really wick them away. And why Merlot does have tannins, it is known to have what we call lacy tannins. So on that textural scale, they're gonna be much smaller. So as opposed to, a Nebbiolo or some of those bigger, brasser wines that really grip, the tannins in a Merlot kind of hang around, they flirt a little bit, and then they like to run away. So that allows you to get that lovely acidity, allows you to get a lot of that fruit texture there in the very beginning. So this on the palate, I get a little bit more of that dark chocolate, a little bit more of that bitter feel. It's gone from a really jammy fruit to like a tartar jam. This is a lovely medium-bodied wine. I love our Merlot because again, that tannin structure is just beautiful. And this is the 2016. I believe if you had this, I would safely age this for 5 to 10 years, or you can just drink it right now. It's a great around the fireplace kind of wine. If you put a slight chill on it, sitting on the back porch, watching a lovely sunset, you really can't go wrong. Next wine I'm gonna move us on to is another one of my favorites. I'm gonna say all these are my favorites. This is our Cab Franc. So this is our 2016 Cab Franc, and this is 90% Cab Franc with 10% Merlot. So remember that Merlot, we're getting that lovely silky tannin structure to it. This is aged for 18 months in French oak. And this is our 3rd vintage on this wine. With Cab Francs, it's a very different palate. So again, if you have a little bit of that Merlot left in your glass, great wine to revisit. They can be a little herbaceous. They can be a little unctuous. They can be more on the green side, the vegetal side. So think of, if if you have a tomato plant in your backyard, those tomato leaves. It can also have a little bit of a green pepper smell to it, just very green by definition smell. Our Cab Franc hits a little bit of those notes, but it's really focused more on fruit. So you're going to be getting a little bit more of that tart raspberry, that ripe blackberry, a little bit of like a cedar box aroma. Let's go ahead and pour that ounce in there, ounce and a half. So this wine, compared to Merlot and a couple different ones, has a little bit of a higher acidity, which for some, I love to pair food with higher acid wines. The reason for that is a lot of foods that we eat, especially in restaurants, are higher fat content. So think about when you cook a steak at home or cook a chicken at home, you know, we might be picking that fat off. In a restaurant, they're probably not doing that for you. So they're gonna have some of that fat on that meat. High acid wines, they make your mouth salivate a little bit, which helps really cut that fat, wick away that fat in your mouth. Cab Franc is one of those wines. So a little bit of high acid wine really helps you pair it with that duck, with that fattier meat. You can even go with like a really rich cedar plank salmon. Fantastic. So we're gonna go ahead and smell this. I love this wine because it's very reminiscent of me of Chinon, or French Cab Franc. Chinon is an amazing area in France that is known pretty much for its Cab Franc, 100% blends of Cab Franc. And they touch a lot of oak there, new and neutral. So this for me is very encompassant of that. So you're getting a little bit of that oak tertiary note, but you're also still holding true to the Virginia fruit. So Virginia, you know, you're looking at a little warmer weather. So you're getting a little bit of acid, you're getting a little bit more of a fruit quality to it. So it's a nice blend between France and Virginia. So right on the nose compared to that Merlot, if you want to go ahead and back and visit it, you know, you got your jammy qualities. Right here on the nose, I hit a little bit of ripe notes. I hit a little bit of underripe notes, so underripe and ripe berries, raspberries, blackberries. I also get that lovely undertone of oak. Not overly bearing, not like I'm smelling an oak table, but more of just a waft, like I'm walking through a winery with all the barrels set aside. Let's go ahead and taste it. Right away, mouth is instantly salivating more than that Merlot. So you've got higher acid. You can feel the tannins are present, but they're not going to be as big. So this is a little bit of a lighter style. So good. If we look at the color as well, you can see it's a little bit thinner. That's very indicative of Cab Franc. Now again, if you were to get you know, a California Cab Franc, you might get a little bit of that green pepper, that really herbaceousness, like literally jalapeno kind of smell. You're not going to get that as much with us. You're going to get a little bit of that herbaceous quality, a touch of green in there, but really, again, we're focusing on that bright, beautiful red fruit. Whenever we're drinking wine, it's really important to swish the wine around, really move it around your mouth, get those teeth nice and stained. And what I'm doing with that is I'm making sure it coats every part of my tongue. You know, making sure I'm getting the parts of my tongue that really sing with acidity, making sure it hits the middle of my tongue where I get a lot of tannins. I'm also getting it around my gums to make sure I can tell what kind of tannin it is. Is it an oak tannin or a grape tannin? So whenever tasting wine, you really want to play with it. If you're in public, maybe a little bit more discreet. But I always like to really switch it around, really get it moving around to get all of those lovely notes and flavors and everything that you're looking for. So that's the 2016 Cab Franc. We're going to move on to one of my other favorites. I'm just going to keep going with the favorites. So we're going to move on to our Windswept Hills. So this is a really great one. This is one of our representations of more of like a right bank style Bordeaux. So Merlot dominant. This is a little bit more heavier on the Cab Franc with 47% Cab Franc, 44% Merlot, and 8% Cab Sauv. This is aged for 18 months in French oak barrels. So you can see the difference in this label. These are our estate wines. This means that all these grapes are grown on the property. Now we are aware that Some wines just don't grow well in Virginia. So what we've done is we sourced some of our wild Barolo label grapes from all over the United States, because we really believe the best representation of a wine should be what you're selling. So for example, our Riesling, we're looking at the Finger Lakes to help represent that wine a little bit more. So this one is 100% estate. And again, we are looking at the right bank of Bordeaux. When people talk about Bordeaux style blends, there are those consistent 5 grapes, and there's a reason for that. Those grapes grow really well, and they grow very differently. So imagine 200 years ago, I'm planting a vineyard in Bordeaux, and all I have is Cab Sauv, and it's a really bad year for Cab Sauv. I'm not gonna have any wine that year. So what I do is I then diversify my portfolio. So I'm gonna plant some Merlot, Petit Verdot, some Malbec, some Cab Franc. So I'm going to diversify my portfolio in case it's a bad year for one grape. I can kind of lean on the other grapes to help me out. And that's where those Bordeaux style blends come from. Now these grapes are typically thicker skinned, so they survive that Virginia early frost and our later storms, which helps out quite a bit. And it can make those big beefier wines. So this is a great representation of that style of Bordeaux. So if you go ahead and swirl in your glass, one of the first things you're gonna notice is there's a very different color hue to this. Now there's something in this glass, and I'm making sure it's not because I have a brown table behind me, but there's something in this glass called garnet. So garnet is very indicative of a wine that is aged and aged well. So if you think of garnet, think of kind of like a rust color, almost like a red brick. These are the tannins changing, they're shifting. So if we look at our Cab Franc, going back to that, you can kind of see this one's more on like a very bright ruby scale. This one's got a little undertone to it. It's got a little touch of that garnet in there. All right, we're gonna go and smell this. So to this to me smells more on the manly side, if you will. That leather, that cedar box, I would say a half-smoked cigar, it's been snubbed out. It's got a rich character to it when it comes to the berries. It also has a slight vegetal note to it. You're looking at kind of like this undertone of rosemary, kind of those lovely spices that you would put with a roast. Go ahead and give it a sip. So right away, you can feel that lovely acidity coming from the Cab Franc. You can get those lovely silky tannins coming from that Merlot. And the Cab Sauv is just gonna add a little bit more of that body to it. This is a very well-rounded wine. It's very smooth. It's a very easy drinking wine. You could pair this with something, or you can have it by yourself. This with a filet mignon, perfect. This on the back porch after the sun is set, perfect. I always say there's a wine for any part of the day. This is a good after sunset kind of wine. All right, so last but certainly not least, we're gonna be trying our 2017 Petit Verdot. This is one of my absolute favorite wines again, but not just this wine itself, the varietal. It's a very underappreciated grape, originally created in France. It was used as kind of a coloring agent. So it's very dark, it's very tannic, it's got a lot of spice, it's got a lot of acid. You're adding a little bit of this wine to your blend to kind of beef it up a little bit, give it a little texture, give it a little bit of something else. Give it a little bit of that spice note. You can see a lot of the Meritage blends in Virginia, Bordeaux style blends. They might have a small amount. They might have, most I've seen is 8 to 1.5%. That 1.5% might seem like a small amount, but it's a huge deal. So we're gonna pour this wine. Right as you're pouring it, let's look at that color. Ink black. It's so dark. And this is 100% Petit Verdot. This is aged for 18 months in French oak. Now, Petit Verdot actually translates to little green ones, which is one of my favorite names for wines. And there's a couple reasons for that. If you were to look at a cluster of these grapes, they're very tight, they're very close together. And the skins on these are gonna be very thick, very dark, but the grapes are gonna be very small, very, very small, about half the size of a regular grape. What that's doing is it's giving me more skin to fruit ratio. So I'm getting more tannins, more color, more pigment from the skins, as opposed to the juice from the fruit. And they're called green because they turn purple, or their variation process is a little bit longer. So they're gonna stay longer green in the season, so they're little green ones. They're super cute. So we're gonna take this glass and swirl it. And the first thing you're gonna see is how dark this wine is. I mean, if I hold this up to my page, I can't read through it. So it's a very dark, very high pigment wine. Swirl it around, let's smell it. So to me, this is like that end of summer, overly ripe, falling off the branch, raspberry in a glass. You know, a little bit of that bramble note to it. It's got a little bit of our terroir, almost like a clay note to it. It's a very rich wine in the glass. And your spices. You know, I'm smelling a little bit of that clove. You know, I get a little bit more on the baking spice side as opposed to like your savory side, your roast side. So this one, again, it's 100%. You can see why this would be used in blendings. It's got a lot of acid to it. It's got a good amount of grip to it, but it's got a lot of character. It's got a lot of flavor. So if I'm adding a small amount to that, for example, to our Cab Franc, which is a little bit lighter, a little bit more playful, if I'm adding just a splash of that, you know, 5% in difference, it's gonna completely change the wine. I'm gonna completely make it a totally different wine. This wine with dark chocolates, forget about it, change your life. It's fantastic. So dark chocolates, you can also go with any type of like barbecue. Or again, this is like your sun after sunset kind of wine. Around a campfire late at night. It's kind of that rich, full body kind of warming wine. Or in the wintertime. A great one for wintertime. So that's all I have for you today. I encourage you to go back now that you've tried them all. Maybe they've warmed up in the glass a little bit. Sip, try, smell, do different things, play around with them. But thank you so much. It's been a pleasure taking you through some of our red wines here at Stone Tower Winery, and we hope to see you soon.